Well, let's continue this discussion on time value analysis. Now, you already know how to take those lump sums, move them back and forth through time. So that's some pretty powerful skills. Now we're going to be taking those same concepts and applying them to cash flows, payments received, or monies received or monies paid over different periods of time. So don't worry, it's pretty easy kind of using the skills that you already have developed. But let's go back and take a look at kind of reinforcing what we've learned here with this kind of this thought discussion, this discussion item here, thought question. Now, this is about bonds. Bonds are a way for a company to basically get a loan directly from the public. So they're skipping the middleman, which is the banker, and they're going directly to you or me to get the money for whatever they want to do, build a hospital or buy CT equipment. I don't know what, but they need some money, so they can do something called an issuance of bonds. Now, in this example, we have a company using something called a 100-year debt bond. Pretty rare nowadays, but what with any bond issuance, there's an implied exchange. You know, you're going to be lending money to a company. They're going to be doing something with it, building a new facility or what have you. But you're just not going to do that out of the goodness of your heart, right? You're going to want paid back something on that. And that is where you're going to get your return on that, your interest payments to you, or what have you, because you're just not going to give them $1,000 and then get $1,000 back in 20 years or 15 years, or in this case, it's 100 years. So these are kind of odd. They don't really exist that much anymore, but there are these 100-year debts that are out there. And the question here, if you read, a company issues a bond out for $1,000. The face value is 1,000. That's typically what bonds are, and it matures in 100 years, which means you'll get $1,000 back in 100 years. The question is, what are you willing to pay for it now? Based on a discount rate, and we'll talk about that, but based on a discount rate or an interest rate, kind of the same thing, of 8%. Well, you know how to do these kind of problems. So let's bring in our handy dandy calculator here, which if you're using that web-based version, that's perfectly fine, or if you're using a mobile app. The mobile apps use the same, basically the same inputs as well. So um, let's go ahead and plug in what we know. All right, we don't know present value. That's what we want to find out. We do know the future value is 1,000, so we'll plug that in. Number of periods, we do know that we're doing, keeping it simple, annual, and we have 100 years. Wow. And there is no payment involved in this particular scenario, so we're going to take that down to 0. And we know the interest rate is 8%. So how much, before I hit the button, what would you pay for a bond that's going to pay your children, because you'll be dead, $1,000? And that's only if the company's around. Think about that. May not be around. You could lose all of your money. How much are you willing to do, assuming that you have chosen a discount rate of 8%? Well, let's hit compute and see what we got. 45 cents. I forgot to put my negative in here. Let's put my negative in here and calculate that correctly. 45 cents. So there we go, is the answer. Let's see, is that correct? And the reveal shows that it is correct. So you are willing to pay 45 cents for a bond that will pay $1,000 years from now. That's pretty amazing, isn't it? Now, also remember too, there's probably somebody involved in this exchange, an exchange agent of some sort, and they're going to take a nickel off of that. So that company is only going to probably receive 40 cents on every one of those bonds that's issued. Kind of a risky endeavor, but there you go. So that's against some real powers that you have now. You're able to calculate those things that may have been a mystery just a little while ago on how you can actually make those decisions or come up with values. All right, well, let's talk about some things that I just introduced in that particular scenario. And one of them was this discount rate, which is somewhat similar to an interest rate, also might be called an opportunity cost rate. And really, Um, what that is you have to figure out some interest, some discounting factor that also might be a term used, which is again like interest rate, a discounting factor to use in order to calculate that. It could have been 10%, it could have been 20%. Um, the company itself issuing the bond can they can give you their own interest rate, but the market can actually adjust that too. So I don't want to get too overly complicated, but imagine a company. I don't know if I'd put a bet on any company lasting 100 years. Now, some have, obviously, AT&T and T and others, but even General Motors, I'm not sure if General Motors made 100 years before they went bankrupt. So even companies, they might have been close to it, but there, we have even big behemoth companies that you never would have thought, would have gone bankrupt have. So there's a risk implied with that, a variability, a question, if that's going to pay off for you. And with that comes up the opportunity cost. So what folks often do to calculate that risk is look at investments or options or paybacks or projects that are of similar risk to figure that out. Remember, not all things are going to have similar risks. Some things are going to be much more variable and risky than others, which would require a higher or lower discount rate. Think about that. If something is more inherently risky, would you want more of an interest payback or less? You'd want more. If it was a sure thing that, let's say you're going to get paid back in 5 years, pretty much a guarantee, which is like the U.S. government is pretty much considered a zero risk investment. That's why the interest rates for government bonds are so low because there really isn't that much risk involved with that versus you um, doing something more risky with a new startup company that wants to issue a bond. Maybe you're gonna give them $50,000. A brand new company just started off. They're making these great 3D goggles, and you're like, well, you could be around. You might be the next Microsoft or Google, or you may be out of money in 6 months. But I'm going to give you $50,000, and I might lose it all. But if I get it all back, I want a really nice return on that. So you're going to want a little bit higher discount rate, or much higher in that case. So for something that you perceive as having more variability or more risk. Variability means fluctuation. Now something can fluctuate to zero and be worth nothing, and then it's game over at that point. Now, how do you come up with the discount rate? That is the real art of this whole thing, the art of this, and has brought many companies to bankruptcy by not getting that opportunity cost, that discount rate correct. Now, there's some things that we can do. You can look at investments that are somewhat similar to that, like I mentioned before, and often a lot of people look at securities. Securities are stocks. So you look at the stock market, you maybe look at a similar type company, and you can figure out, what their discount rate is based off of, it being existing already in the market. So, that's a nice, easy way to do it. And stocks are very plentiful. It's a very easy kind of thing to calculate that. But this thing gets really tricky when you're looking at major projects that you want to do and you're calculating paybacks on building a hospital or some major new thing like going into a new line of business. What kind of discount rates would you apply to that type of investment? And getting that wrong, even by a few percentage points, has sunk many businesses. So that's kind of the tricky part there, but just know that we typically look at securities to try to find a similar type of interest rate to get that more accurate, either that present value or that future value. All right, well, let's talk about something totally different now, changing a little bit, going into those annuities that I talked about earlier, which you may have heard on, with on TV or ads. There are annuities for individuals that you can get, but they basically do the same thing. It's an annuity is really the term for anything that's going to have a periodic cash flow to it. And for most of us, we're used to it on a personal level because you can go out and buy annuities. Um, for your own and retirement needs or what have you. A lot of when you look at some of those big payouts with the lotteries, those are basically annuity payments that come out. Where you could do the there's a hey, now you know how to do this actually. When have you ever seen like it's $20 million, right? Hey, that sounds great. I'm buying my lottery ticket. I'm buying my Powerball. Uh, but then you look at the cash value. Cash value is 7.3 million. I'm just making that up. Well, what they do is they take that, well, they obviously have a certain amount of money that they have to deal with by the tickets that are purchased. And they're able to apply discounting to that to either come up with a lump sum now, or when they talk about you winning the 20 million, they're actually just adding up all of those annuity payments that were paid over 20 years or whatever they do with that. So that's how lottery payments work. So many of those are kind of based off of annuity calculations. There are two different types of annuities. There's the ordinary annuity, or we just call annuity, and then there's the weird one, which we call annuity due, which is down here. Well, what's the difference between the two? It really depends on when your payment is received. It's still the same amount of payments. If you can count up here, there's one, two, three payments, and for the ordinary annuity. And for the annuity due, there's one, two, three payments here. It's just that with the annuity due, kind of a weird name with the word due on there, um, the payments happen at the beginning of the time period versus the end of the time period. So again, remember we said the end is at the where the little hash mark is right here. So again, just how your money is received up front. Okay, so those are our two types of annuities. Let's look at a situation here, a sample to kind of work through this conceptually. So what is the future value of a 3-year ordinary annuity or just regular annuity? If I'm ever using in a question or a test, I'll make sure that if it doesn't say annuity due, assume it's the regular variety of annuity. But let's say we've got what is the future value of a 3-year ordinary annuity of $100 invested at 10%? All right, so we're investing money at time period 1, time period 2, and time period 3. What is that? Now, you know how to calculate it longhand, with doing the exponents, but you also know how to do the calculations with the calculator or our little website as well. So you could actually future value this particular payment out to the time period 3. But here's the trick. Make sure you don't use a 3. This is where it's kind of nice with these timelines. You actually count 1, 2. There's 2 periods. So you're only future valuing this out to 2 periods. Go ahead, try that little calculator. It should work for you. And then you can do the same thing with this one. This one you can do in your head because you don't have the compounding effect. Remember, where interest is earning interest, and it's simply 10% higher because it's 10% a year, so it's 110. And then you got this last payment that you're doing at the very end, which no interest has taken effect on it because you're paying it at the end of the period. But you got to add that one on as well. So you've got, you add up all these three cash flows together. Again, this one has no discounting or to it, either forward. In this case, we're going forward in time, but this one does, and of course the one that we have at the end of time period 1 as well. And the total future value on that is $331. That's how much your um, future value of those annuity investment payments would be at the end of pay period 3. Now let's take a little different way, little different look at calculating that. There's a way that the calculator can help us with that. So let's bring up our handy dandy website that so far we like. It hasn't let us down yet. And we're going to use a function on there we haven't used yet, and that's that payment function. Now it's already kind of defaulted, like I can clear the values, but it always puts $100 in there. We're going to leave that in there. Just happens to work out, $100. Number of periods. Now just, we have 3 periods, right? That's what it said, 3. So we're going to put in 3 in there. Future value, we don't know that. Present value doesn't really count here. But we are going to put in the interest rate, which we were having at, let me double check. What was our interest rate again? Our interest rate was 10%. That's right. Okay, and we're going to leave the payment at, remember the beginning and the end one I said don't kind of worry about? Well, we might start worrying about where that button's marked. But right now we're still doing at the end because this is an ordinary annuity or the basic run-of-the-mill annuity. And let's hit the future value button and see if we're correct. $331. Yay, we've got it. So you can use the calculator to calculate those future value of an annuity. So now you can do that. Well, you know what I'm going to ask for next, right? We're going to take that annuity payment, and now let's go present value. You know how to do the individual cash flows. Now that's, one way to do that. Kind of breaking down each one, calculating individually. But let's bring back our handy dandy calculator and check that out. Yes, the double check here, 10 per. Okay, we're going to still ordinary annuity. So we're going to make that down to 0. Future value. We still have our 3% or 3 periods there. Sorry, our N is 3, our $100, our 10%. And let's go ahead and calculate the present value. Ta-da! Isn't that wonderful? $248.69. Well, look at that. There you go. So now you can take that annuity stream and you can calculate it either. You can go here, year 3, or at year 1 on a series of, let's say you could think of it like investments, a series of investments that you make of $100 going into whatever, maybe a new facility, or it could be hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you can always add more zeros onto this, right? But how much would the present value of that annuity can be? That's really powerful too, because when you're looking at, let's say it's you're building a facility and you're you're comparing, let's say you're comparing two CT scanners. I pick on CTs because I'm a CT tech. And you somehow have estimated revenues on these. I don't know how, but maybe you've estimated revenues. Well, maybe one is more efficient, one's faster, maybe one does more fancier exams, but the exams are more expensive. Well, anyhow, you've come up with some numbers of estimated revenues that you're going to be receiving um, on that scanner. And if it happened to be equal, that's kind of the nice thing about annuities is that the payments are equal. You can bring those back to a present value so you can compare maybe two different options that had equal payments. And that could be, income that you expect to be getting off of this scanner or whatever you're looking at. And that way you can compare the two and see which one's the better option for you. Otherwise, it's kind of hard to conceptualize which one should I do, which one is best for my organization. This way, with discounting and bringing those cash flows back to some point, usually to the present value, you can help make decisions. Okay, I think your skills are almost complete. Let's take a look here. There is the calculator solution, which we just did, and we got the correct number there, so that looks great. Now, let's take a look at what are the future values and present values if the annuity were an annuity due. Remember, it has that weird one where it's happening at the beginning of the pay periods. Well, this one, we're going to bring it back and we're going to flip the button to beginning. It's just that simple. All right, bring that back down to 0. And let's go ahead and calculate our present value, $273. We'll zero that out. And we can also calculate our future value, 364. Let's see if that matches up with the correct answers. There we go. We have our $273 and some change, which is what we got. We actually had 273.55 right on the money. And with our calculator, double checking myself here. And then we should have for our other one with the for our future value, oh, at 364. Check. Yes, we are looking spot on. Great. Just remember though, when you're using that, when we're doing the annuity due, flip that to the beginning of the period. And don't forget to flip it back because I'll do that sometimes and doing calculations and realize I didn't put it back. Usually end is the default. All right, so there's some very powerful techniques with annuities that you now know how to do and the cash flows. The calculator is the easier way to do it. You can always do it longhand with the exponents as we did at the very beginning of the first lecture, but I think you'll find the calculator is a lot easier.